I came here to talk to you because I'm the ship's counselor.
On Star Trek The Next Generation, Counselor Deanna Troi finally started to wear a regulation Starfleet uniform in later seasons, and it completely changed the character and the show. Why did she start wearing one, and how did it change everything? Let's discuss right now.
I understand you've had some interesting dreams recently.
I find Deanna Troi to be one of the most underappreciated characters on Star Trek The Next Generation. By recognizing the importance of mental health, especially when you're off in space exploring the final frontier and undiscovered countries, dealing with insurrections, first contacts, and nemesi, all of those things, a counselor was added to the cast of Starfleet officers. Like, seriously, all of the other Star Trek shows should have a counselor. But there's nobody quite like Deanna Troi. And yet, Troi rarely wore a Starfleet uniform until the final seasons of The Next Generation, and how it happened and why is quite surprising. I mean, let's be real here. The actual reason why Troi had a penchant for civilian attire was not as high-minded as Star Trek is supposed to be. Given the full-body costumes, there was little in the way of showing skin among the cast. To add a bit to sex appeal, they gave Deanna Troi often low-cut, skin-tight outfits. That's the cold truth, but if we actually look in-universe, Troy's lack of a Starfleet uniform makes a lot of sense. The USS Enterprise D was a ship with a crew of almost 1,000 people, also with civilians and children. The Starfleet uniform is a symbol of authority, so Troi wore civilian clothes without rank to make people feel more comfortable opening up to her. But it's that same symbol of authority that inspired her to later wear only Starfleet uniforms while on duty in The Next Generation Season 6 and 7. After the series' pilot episode, Troi sticks to civilian clothes until the two-part episode Chain of Command in Season 6. Ronnie Cox guest starred as the infamous Captain Jellicoe, who was given command of the Enterprise in Picard's absence. His style of commanding was very different from Picard's, and he faced a lot of resistance from the crew. When Counselor Troi tries to explain to Jellicoe why the crew is showing resistance, he tells her to start wearing her uniform because he appreciates formality on the bridge.
I'd appreciate it if you wore a standard uniform when you're on duty.
But then the funny thing is that after that, she is rarely seen out of her uniform. And you may think it's because Jellicoe got to her, but really, Troi started this journey a season earlier. In the Season 5 episode called Disaster, you guessed it, a disaster happens. A power outage affects the Enterprise, and because Troi is the senior officer on the bridge, she has to take command. And this proved to be a challenge. You see, Troi is part of the alien Betazoid species. These aliens are incredibly empathetic, and Troi uses her emotions while in command, going with orders that feel right. It's this sort of ability that allows her in a later episode to be the only one who realizes something is wrong once everyone loses their memories. A later Season 7 episode potentially explains why Troi stayed in uniform. She mentions that her brief time in command was both frightening and an exciting challenge, so she decides to go up for promotion to full commander. While she never mentions the Starfleet uniform, if Troi wanted to lead, she would need the authority a uniform provided, and it definitely helped her become more involved with the crew. The character of Deanna Troi had a fascinating journey throughout production. Earlier drafts of the Betazoid race saw the species not only as full of empathy, but also have an increased libido. While someone like Captain Kirk probably would have liked that, thankfully, writers eventually talked Gene Roddenberry out of this idea. I mean, I sort of get it. While that seems more of a way to boost ratings, the idea was to challenge the moral conventions of the time about women and sex. Anyways, this all relates to Troi's character and the way she was handled earlier in the show's run. Yes, she was great in her role, but there was still something missing. But according to the actress who played the character, Troi's characterization improved once she donned the Starfleet uniform. In 2001, Marina Sirtis was quoted saying, "I was thrilled when I got my regulation Starfleet uniform. Consequently, I got all my brains back, because when you have cleavage, you can't have brains in Hollywood." And this was essentially true in the show. Once she was in uniform, Troi would go on on away missions, use phasers, and generally take part in more action-oriented scenes way more often than she did before. I mean, I completely understand where Sirtis is coming from, but I always found Troi to be a vital part of the crew and a great balance with the rest of the characters. Whether in uniform or perhaps more revealing civilian clothes, Troi is a remarkable character. She is arguably the most compassionate and caring character in the main cast, and she's definitely carved out a place for herself among leaders, warriors, and scientists with her depth of concern for people. At its core, that is what Star Trek is supposed to be about. However, the uniform change had a big effect on both Troi and Sirtis, and the performance as Troi only got stronger once she started looking like a member of the crew. Who do you think had the best uniform in Star Trek The Next Generation? Do you prefer Troi as a character who wears civilian clothes or rocks the Starfleet uniform? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching CBR. See you next time.